where he fell to the ground. In a magic academy surrounded by magicians, he was shocked because he didn't remember seeing Anna's truck before he got here, and everyone around him was laughing at his clothes. Louise Mack, who called him, wanted to abandon him like his father and tried to call another familiar, but the teacher didn't allow her and forced her to sign a contract. As she approached him, he pulled away because he didn't trust women. Louise told him to stand still and made a contract with him, and a mark appeared on his hand, meaning that a connection had been established. He found out what kind of magician was from a noble family, was completely useless in magic, and all her spells always fail and turned against her, so everyone called her Zero. She took him to her room, still angry with him, and began to treat him like a servant, throwing him her clothes so that he could wash them. Seka tried to object and told her to shove it in her ass, but she took out her magic wand and cast a spell on him that again didn't work and caused another explosion. When everyone had calmed down a little, Seka decided to take a chance and ran out of the room into the corridor, where he ran into a stupid blonde guy named Gucci. He doesn't stop and runs until he runs out of the building, and Louise runs after him, but Gucci uses his magic to lift the sight into the air, and he can only wave his hands, seeing two moons in the sky and realizing that this is not a dream, but he really ended up in a parallel world. In that night, Sada had to sleep on the floor, and Louise chained him so that he would not run away. At night, she threw her clothes to him and told him to wash them, to which he reluctantly agreed, realizing that in this world it was so customary. Then she went to bed, and the next day he woke up early to wash her clothes and bring them to her. She said that there were still a lot of unwashed clothes in her closet, and this made him angry, but he remained silent. She asked him to help her get dressed, but he refused, saying that he didn't want her servant and will do this only if she lets him go. She agreed, and he helped her get dressed. When he was freed from the chains, they went to the dining room for breakfast. Sijita, who had not eaten anything since he came into this world, was hungry but noticed that people were whispering and looking at them. Louise asked him to move her chair, and she sat down on the floor at her feet. He ate a piece of stale bread on a broken plate. After breakfast, they went outside, and he saw the other students communicate with their familiars. He ran into Frederica, whose familiars are not breathing salamander. She laughed at Louise, assuming that she had brought a peasant with her to pretend that she had a familiar. Louise was upset and left. Sada accidentally ran into a mate named Siesta, who dropped the cake. They both apologized, and he picked up the cake and put it back on the plate. Siesta, the same peasant as him, said that she was just a maid and not a noblewoman. Gucci, who had previously flirted with her, called Siesta and asked if he could take the cake to him, to which she agreed. He took the cake to Gucci, who was with the girl, and heard Gucci say that he had no one but her, and couldn't help but laugh at this lie. Kasha asked what amused him so much, and Sue told him that the day before he saw Guel flirting with a freshman. Gucci tried to deny it, but Seo pointed out yesterday's girl exposed Gu's deception. Both girls found out about each other and gave Gucci a slap, from which he fell to the ground. Gucci challenged Swa to a duel, and he agreed. Louise insisted that he apologize, but Swa ignored her and went to the place of the duel. Gucci was surprised that Swa had come. Louise tried to intervene, saying that duels were prohibited at the university. Gucci objected that duels between nobles were prohibited, but Swa, the peasant, made it acceptable. The duel began, but Gucci used a robot to fight instead of him. Instead of meeting Sayo face to face, the robot hit Sayo. He fell, and Louise advised him to surrender, but he refused despite his wounds. He continued to get up, and Gucci gave him a sword, thinking that Sayo couldn't lift him. To surprise Gucci, Sho felt his pain intensify, and with one blow he cut the robot in half. Gucci summoned more robots, but Sayo defeated them all before he put the sword Gucci's throat, forcing him to surrender. People were amazed that the peasant had defeated the nobleman, and Louise rushed to his aid. Decide lost consciousness from fatigue. He woke up in a familiar bed. All Chechi was in bandages in the room. She said that he was unconscious for 3 days. Louise was also there. She was sleeping by the window, tired from taking care of him. The life of the site returned to its usual course. Now he had to wash all his clothes every day and dress up Louise. One day he went to class with her, and in the class they began to laugh at her, calling her Louise Levi, which amused the site very much, and they left the class. He asked Louise about this, and she explained why she behaved like that. Calls that he thought it was very funny, and he began to laugh at her and get even more angry. In the end, he wrote a song to make fun of her even more. What kind of guy is he? Louise got angry and refused to give him food. That day, night, Swa constantly asked her to eat, and when she finally agreed, Swa, a huge skull mom, started teasing her again, which made her angry again, and she made him sleep on the street. When he was trying to sleep on the street, Cece saw him and said that Louise kicked him out, and he didn't eat anything. took him to the kitchen where the workers gave him a lot of food because he was the only peasant who was able to defeat the nobleman he ate, and returned to his bed in the will of Louise's room, where he was caught by salamander freaks who kidnapped him and took him to her room. She tries to seduce him so that he would come over to her side, but before he could do anything, Louise comes into the room and takes him back to her place. She explains to him that her family and Frederick's family is at enmity, and although she doesn't care about him, she won't allow him to be near Frederica. But Sada doesn't seem to have any communication skills, and he asks if she's jealous, and she loses her temper and beats him up. After that, she tells him to go to bed quietly because tomorrow they're going to the city. Seiga goes outside again but stops him and says that he can spend the night in the room, to which he happily agrees. The next day, Louise took Sada with her to the city. She told him that Frederica looks like became interested in him and insisted that he needed a weapon for protection. They went to the forge where Louise asked for the best sword but was shocked by the price. Then she asked for something on a budget and settled on an old rusty sword. That evening, Frida entered their room with a golden sword that they could not afford. She gave it to Sa and asked which side he wanted to be on. Sa was confused because he wanted an expensive sword, but during their argument from a rusty sword, a voice was heard that called both girls. The idiot Seiga denied that it was him, and they realized that the voice came from the rusty sword itself. Seiga greeted the sword and they introduced themselves to each other. Seiga, feeling lonely, was glad that she had found a friend and decided to leave the old sword instead of the expensive one. The next evening, she washes one of Louise's silk dresses, but he doesn't succeed. As in everything else, suddenly Siesta comes up to him and helps him clean the dress. Later, she very sadly says goodbye to him and leaves. The next day, Louise asks him to wait outside while she teaches the lesson, and he agrees. While he waits, one of the cooks from the kitchen comes up to him and invites him to eat. He is looking for Siesta, but cannot find her. He asks the cook, and he replies that Siesta resigned from the academy this morning and she was taken by a nobleman named Count Mott. With a very surprised Tan later returns to Louise's room to talk to her. She explains that when the nobles take the maids, they want to make them their mistresses even if they are against it. He is shocked and asks if she is angry, but for Louise, this is a common thing, and she replies that she is sorry for the siesta, but they can't do anything. Later that night, he runs away from the castle and heads to the Count's house. He goes inside, but he is immediately caught by the guards and taken to the Count, and so on. The Count looks at him and tells him to get out because he wants to live, but Seiga refuses to run and asks what needs to be done for the Count to let go of the siesta. The Count replies that if he could bring the book that belongs to Frederick, that is, a family heirloom, then he would let go of the siesta. Seiga quickly runs away into the forest where Louise, who was looking for him, finds him. She takes him and tells him to shut up and go to bed because they can't do anything. Seiga agrees with Louise and lies to her that he will go to bed and sneaks into Frederick's bedroom and asks for Frederick's family heirloom. To his surprise, not very worried about relics, and happily gives it to him on the condition that he goes on a date with her. This disgusts him, and he runs out of the room, surprising even Frederica, who now wonders what made him so angry. He takes the sword and sits on one of the horses and then heads to the Count's house. Meanwhile, Frederica goes to Louise's bedroom with her friend Charlotte will be hers and talks about Sada's behavior. Louise is shocked that he is not there and does not understand where he went, but Charlotte replies that in her opinion, he went to the Count again. They all board Charlotte's dragon and rush to the Count's house. Sheba, on the other hand, again tries to get into the Count's mansion, but he is immediately caught by the guards and brought to the Count. Jua takes out a sword, which makes the Count furious because not a single peasant can draw a weapon against a nobleman. He breaks a vase and uses the water from it to attack Jua. Jua falls before he manages to come to his senses. The Count turns the water into short daggers and throws them at her. Fortunately, he appears at the last moment and throws away the daggers, saving her. The Count is shocked that the daughters of such noble families were in his house and calms down a little, deciding to talk to them. He tells Louise that for what Seiga did, he should be beheaded, but Louise begs him to let Seiga go and punish her instead of him. Frederica asks what could make him forgive Seiga for what he did, his transgression, and the Count replies that if he could get her family's heirloom, he would forgive him. Figari immediately takes out the book and hands it to the Count, who happily takes it and begins to leaf through it. Seiga reminds him of his promise, and the Count absent-mindedly orders the guards to release Siesta and let her go, thanks him for his help, and kisses him on the cheek before they all return to the academy. A few days later, Louise suddenly got the idea of visiting an exhibition where students would demonstrate their familiars in order to win a prize. Side thought her sudden enthusiasm was strange, because she had never been interested in such things before. She began to teach him manners and correct speech, but her efforts were not crowned with success. She also tried to correct his posture, but this also did not help. Louise could not think of what talent he could demonstrate, until Seva jokingly offered to show his skills in the laundry, for which he received a well-deserved beating. Then she remembered his fighting skills and asked if he could show them, but Sada refused. Still embarrassed by his unsuccessful fencing last time, Louise insisted that he train so as not to embarrass himself. At the performance, Sada trained in the yard but looked quite funny trying to keep his balance. Cecilia informed him that Princess Henrietta was coming to their academy, and this motivated everyone to try with all her might. Princess Henrietta arrived, and after the first formalities she seemed to them a friendly and elegant girl. That evening Louise asked Sada how his training with the sword was going, but he admitted that he had problems of balance. He jokingly offered to demonstrate his skills again in the laundry, which angered Louise. Before she could answer, a hooded figure entered the room and hugged Louise. To their surprise, it turned out to be the princess herself. The princess and Louise had been friends since childhood and were very close. The princess valued her friendship with Louise after the death of her father. Despite Louise's apology for the behavior of the gray-haired princess, they would make noise during the performance. On the day of the performance, Louise was very nervous during the performance, so Louise introduced him as her friend from the peasant class, which made everyone laugh. The princess, although she was embarrassed, did not laugh. The performance was unsuccessful, and he became the object of ridicule. Louise, burning with shame, quickly took him off the stage. Outside, they encountered a giant, the golem, that attacked them. The herd protected Louise, but was captured. Louise tried to use a fireball spell, but accidentally damaged the tower. The golem was released, but he managed to grab something and run away. Sid was saved by Charlotte, who was flying on her dragon. Later, a commission was created to investigate the theft, but no leads were found yet. The next day, Louise and Sada were in class, and Frederica continued to chase Sada. She brought delicious food to the class, knowing that Sabin doesn't get such treats when he stays with Louise. She even fed him herself, much to Louise's displeasure. Suddenly, a teacher came into the classroom and asked Louise to follow him. Frederica and Charlotte were taken to the director's office, where he spoke about the unusual theft of a secret weapon from the castle. The director suspected that this was done deliberately and called on everyone to be vigilant. Believing that the thief was someone from the academy, the director had a sketch of the thief, but her face was hidden. They knew that she headed into the jungle after stealing a weapon. He asked the volunteers to catch the thief, but to their surprise, no one wanted to pursue her because of the dangerous golem that was with her. Even the director was disappointed by the reluctance of the aristocrats to act. However, Louise raised her hand, and Charlotte and Frederica followed her example. This surprised everyone, and they expressed fear that the three girls from the third year would cope with the thief themselves. The director praised them for their bravery and told about their exceptional abilities. Charlotte's status as a knight is strong. Frederica's fire magic and Louise's pedigree, as well as Sato's sword skills, made them an invincible team. The director's secretary also volunteered to lead them through the forest, and the director approved it. The group went into the forest and discovered traces left by a thief along the way. Frederica offered Sato the sword that she bought, and after Louise's tacit approval, he took it. They followed the trail to a secluded house in the middle of nowhere. Charlotte used her magic to find hidden traps, but not finding any, they went inside. They found an abandoned house with broken dishes and scattered furniture. They were about to leave when Charlotte found the stolen item, the Staff of Destruction, but then they were interrupted by Louise's scream came from outside. The golem returned and attacked them. Charlotte tried to use wine magic against him, but it did not help. Frederica used fire magic, which, although it gave some effect but could not defeat the golem. Charlotte called her dragon to help, but Louise, feeling useless because of her imperfect magic, attacked the golem several times, attracting his attention when the golem was about to deliver the final blow and saved her, but slapped her in the face so that she understood what Louise was worth. Louise admitted that the criticism of her magical abilities greatly injured her. The golem continued to forge and fought bravely with the sword that Frederica gave him, but he broke in despair. He took out a rusty sword that promised not to break. Sight felt a surge of energy and attacked the golem with renewed vigor. Despite the fact that the golem was damaged again and again, its regeneration abilities did not allow it to die. Louise, deciding to make her contribution, tried to use the Staff of Destruction but could not control it. The golem approached her, but Sosnova saved her by taking the staff from her. He recognized it as a rocket launcher from modern Japan. He installed it and used it to destroy the golem. Charlotte, Frederica, and the satyr returned to Louise and took the stolen item. The director's secretary, however, Sada noticed that the secretary was acting very calmly. She took off her glasses and let down her hair, and it turned out that it was a thief named Fundum. She mocked them, but Saw quickly knocked her out before she could fire the weapon. On the way back, Saw explained that the weapon was a rocket launcher from his world, so he knew that it could only be fired once. In the director's office, they were congratulated and told that they should go to the capital to receive a reward for their capture. Thieves later in the capital of Sada watched from the side as people danced and had fun. Suddenly he saw that Louise entered the hall in a beautiful dress, and instead of dancing with someone else, she approached him and invited him to dance, to which he happily agreed. The next day, Louise and Si were invited to the royal palace, where Henrietta thanked them for saving her. Then she walked up to Si and extended her hand to him for a kiss. But this fool did not understand what this meant. Louise said him to kiss her, and then suddenly he turned into a tough guy and kissed the princess on the face and not on the hand. Then Haran knocked her out. After that, Louise beat him up and then asked for forgiveness and pushed away. Then Henrietta said that everything was fine and asked them for services, and Louise agreed to do anything for her. The princess said that they would have to live in the city for a while because she wants. They pretended to be ordinary people and spied on aristocrats who mistreat ordinary people. Louise immediately agrees and says that they will do whatever she says without question. Later that day, Louise leaves the store dressed in simple clothes that she does not like, but she is forced to wear them so as not to stand out. Then she takes him to the stable where she tries to buy a horse, but she realizes that they are too expensive and they can't afford it yet. Then she finds a 5-star hotel and tries to book a room, but the hotel only accepts rich people and they don't have enough money to rent a room. She starts to get angry, and when Sada offers to rent a cheaper room, she pounces on him and leaves in the evening. Sada walks her on a bench and she admits that she lost all the money in the casino because she wanted more money and says that she needs to return to the princess and ask for more money. But Louise refuses, saying that they can't let her down. Sada complains that he's hungry, when suddenly a man from the Pride Parade comes up to him and asks if they want to spend the night with him because he is willing to give them a room on one condition. The condition turns out to be that Louise must work as a waitress in a hotel along with other girls because a man is breaking gender norms alone. Louise seems very angry and Sada is forced to help in the kitchen under the leadership of a woman named Jessica. All the girls clear the tables, and the rainbow flag waving above them says that the one who gets the most tips will receive a huge bonus, and the outfit he wears every evening. He explains that this outfit is magical, and whoever wears it will receive tips from all the customers, and says that the girl who put it on last time got so much money that she quit her job and became a blogger on Instagram. Service begins and Louise gets the first table with wine, but the client asks her to pour it out, which makes her angry because he's just a peasant. She hides her anger and pours out the wine, but in the end she spills it and the client starts to behave strangely, asking if she has a chat. She gets angry and throws one in his face, threatening to kill him. But the Pride Parade participants quickly, they hug the client and take her away for napkins while he wipes the client's face with his lips. Somehow the first dinner ends and Louise tells Sada about it, who advises her to calm down because they have a place to spend the night and food. And in the meantime he makes his bed and goes to bed as usual, while Louise is having a hard time adjusting. Louise can't sleep and sees some bats that scare her and she climbs under the blanket with him to feel safe and sleep. The next couple nights she tries, but again and again attacks the client. Because of one thing or another, Pride tells her to step aside and look at the other girls because she feels that she cannot do this and sees how Sao is having fun and this enjays her. So she throws a bottle at his head and knocks him out. He comes to in the bedroom and sees Jessica, who tells him that he passed out and then asks if Louise is an aristocrat. This immediately worries Saad, who tries to hide this fact, but Jessica laughs and says that Louise can't even hold a plate normally, although her manners and confidence indicate that she is a noble woman. Sada admits that he has a secret mission and this worries Jessica, who asks for details, but then Louise comes into the room and he immediately gets up and introduces Jessica as a daughter from the Pride Parade. Louise doesn't care and she kicks him in the groin again, knocks him out and then drags him out into the street, but Jessica stops her and asks if she has already earned any tips. Louise gets embarrassed and tells her to mind her own business, and when Sua tries to say something she kicks him in the face again. The next evening Louise stands aside worrying that she won't get the bonus because today is the last date that Humpty Dumpty enters the hotel with his guards and he is immediately served under a rainbow flag. The whole hotel is crowded and there are no places, but the guards vacate the room and he sits on his fat ass and orders the sausage lover to start serving him. Jessica tells Sada that this fat man is a tax collector, If they are not nice to him, then they will have to pay big taxes. She tells him that no one wants to serve him when Louise approaches him with a tray hoping to get a good tip, but the fat man is not impressed and starts laughing at her, which makes her angry and she kicks him in the face in rage, shocking everyone in the hotel, and the guards surround her while the parade participants ask for forgiveness. Sao approaches the fat man and tells him to get out because he won't let anyone hurt Louise. Fatman orders the Napa security guard, but Sao reaches for Sor, but he realizes that he forgot it in his room. He gets scared and starts crying, but Louise uses her magic wand to blow them up, which shocks the fat man, and he realizes that Louise is not an ordinary peasant woman and must be a noble lady. He still thinks that she is from a poor family, but she shows him a royal decree, which scares him to the core, and he offers her a lot of money to settle this matter and asks for forgiveness. Louise tells them to get out, and they all run out into the street, and Louise, surrounded by maids who thank her for what she did, and even a flag of pride, is happy for her, and Jessica owes her that the money that Fat Man gave makes her the highest paid waitress, and the hostess declares her the winner of the competition. That night they go to bed, and Si thinks about what they will do tomorrow. The next day they set off on horseback, and on the way they meet Jessica, who immediately gives Si a very soft elastic bell, which drives Louise crazy. She says that she is going to visit Tabitha and invites them to come in before getting into her carriage. Lucy doesn't like it, but Sega promises to come in and gets hit in the face on the way. Jessica tries to talk to Tabitha, but she still continues to read the book, and Jessica complains that she was kicked out of her previous school, and because of this, her parents almost married her to an old man who wanted to become her daddy. Suddenly the carriage stops, and the farmer says that the road is flooded and they will have to go the other way, which seems suspicious to Jessica. Meanwhile at school, Louise again gives all her underwear to Sada, telling him to wash it, and kicks him out. She is still angry at him for being happy with Jessica, because her little brain cannot understand that she hit Sada more than all her enemies combined. That she saw him with someone else. She asks her if Louise is back and leaves, and Gucci runs after her. After that, Shua notices a huge old rusty cauldron in front of the kitchen, and when he asks the cook, he says that he can keep it with a happy roll of the cauldron to a secluded place ready to use it for its intended purpose. When they return to the carriage, Jessica notices a flooded houses below, which is very strange considering that there was no rain. She also notices a poster that makes her think that Tabitha belongs to one from the royal families. Finally, they get to her mansion, which turned out to be even larger than Jessica imagined, and the butler is ready to receive them. He escorts them to the guest room where Jessica sits down, and Tabitha goes to another room to meet his mother. She enters the room and sees a fragile woman with blue hair who looks out the window, and how when Tabitha introduces herself, the old woman gets scared and asks her to leave. Meanwhile, in the living room, Jessica asks the butler about the painting on the wall, and he explains that it is a portrait of Tabitha's father, the king's younger brother. He was an excellent magician, more powerful than the king himself, and almost everyone in the kingdom loved him. But one day an unknown killer shot him in the chest and killed him. After that, when Tabitha and her mother came to the palace for some event, one of the aristocrats tried to poison that bat, but her mother realized that something was wrong and, like crazy, instead of pouring out the poison, she drank it herself in the glass. There was a magical poison that affected her reason, and since then she behaves as if the doll in her hands is Tabitha and her real daughter is completely abandoned. After this, Tabitha changed and began to perform insanely dangerous tasks that even the best mages are afraid to take on, and even killed a three-headed dragon. After that, she was tired of all this and decided to enter the academy away from every one of these memories. At the academy, Sio, who has a very developed intellect, decided to make a jacuzzi and enjoys an evening bath under the starry sky, admiring to moons. Meanwhile, the blonde invited the geech on a date holding a love potion in her hands. Sada goes into the water, and at that moment Siesta comes to check on him and gets scared by dropping the food. She also gets into the bath to wash herself, and they talk about the moon, and Gu comes up to the table and starts flirting with the blonde, but she offers a toast and tries to pour the potion. But Gucci notices that Louise is angry and walks along. She walks along the lawn and sees that Sada is taking a bath with a siesta, and this upsets her and she is jealous, angry, flirting. But the blonde screams that she saw a naked flying woman and pours a love potion. To their surprise, Louise comes up to them, takes the glass, drinks it to the bottom, and leaves in anger. A little later, Saida returns to the room where she sees Lachi, who is lying on the bed pouting, and asks what happened. At first, she behaves passive-aggressively, but then she blushes and her true feelings break out. She hugs Swa and tells how sad she was when he took a bath with a siesta and even admits that he loves her. With confusion looks around and sees that the blonde looks into the room and says that it is her fault in the mansion. Tabitha is sleeping on the bed and Jessica is thinking about the task that the butler gave to Tabitha and about that she must fulfill it as soon as possible. Tabitha asks Jessica to stay in the house until she returns because it is dangerous, but Jessica says that she will go with her. Her thoughts are interrupted when Tabitha dreams of a nightmare and she hugs her to calm her down. The next day, Sada, as usual, goes to wash the clothes, but Louise does not leave his side. He remembers yesterday's conversation when the blonde said that the potion was intended for the Duce because he is a deceiver and cannot be faithful. But Louise accidentally drank it, and because she had feelings for him, she didn't leave him. He asks when the effect of the potion will wear off, but she doesn't know. Louise continues to hang on Sat and says that she can't leave him alone because he will go to other girls. At that very moment Cecilia comes and Louise immediately starts acting like a jealous ex and accuses Sat of cheating on her with Cecily, which makes her feel awkward, and she runs away and Louise gets angry at him for liking him. Cecily and runs away. He catches up with Cecily and sees that she is washing clothes at the fountain. He tells her that everything she saw was not true and it is just a big misunderstanding, but Cecilia does not answer him and says that she doesn't care. Sada tells her that this is happening because of the love potion that Louise accidentally drank last night, and since then she has been like this. Cecilia turns around and tells him that he does not need to lie to her because even she knows that the love potion is a forbidden drug that no one uses either in the academy or outside of it. Sada returns to her room, and Louise is still lying on the bed upset about what happened, and as soon as Sada arrives she starts crying and says that she doesn't feel beautiful at all. Sada falls out of the bed, but he gets up, hugs her and says that he will find a way to fix everything. That evening Sada goes down the stairs to the room. Blondie pushes Gucci away and tells her to return Louis to his previous appearance. She says that this will happen on its own over time. Achua approaches her and tells her to find an antidote or a spell to do it immediately. Gui tries to interrupt him by saying that he is talking to an aristocrat, but with reminds him that he was recently beaten, and Gui immediately shuts up. Yuji tells the blonde that she should probably do what he says, but she stands her ground and says that it is impossible. Shua decides to use his trump card, says that he knows that love potions are forbidden, so that's why he will go to the director and tell him about it. The blonde immediately gets scared and says that she will do it, but the ingredients are in a dangerous place where it is very difficult to get to. But Sada tells her that they will go there tomorrow, and after several threats the blonde agrees that night. Lucy bites him for no reason before going to bed, while Sada is looking after her. The next morning they all get on their horses and ride to the lake, and Louis is still sleeping in Sada's arms. They drive up to the lake and Butch runs ahead, and Lucy says everything that she knitted him a sweater and hands him a sweater that looks more like a hat, but Sua puts it on anyway. Suddenly, they hear the cry of a Bim who slipped and fell into the water, and Blim watches with admiration as this area that was supposed to be a village is now completely flooded. She says that the water spirit got angry and that's why this happened, and asks them to wait until the evening because that's when the spirit comes out of the water. In the evening the blonde takes it out of the bag. The frog pierces her finger, drops blood on him, and orders him to find the water spirit. The frog jumps off the stone like when the blonde says that in her youth she made a pact with the spirit and that the spirit should remember her. Suddenly a huge wave of water rises into the sky, and the blonde calls her name and the names of her family and then asks the spirit to show herself. The water takes the form of a woman and the spirit says that she remembers the blonde and then asks what the hell she needs. The blonde replies that they need a special ingredient, but the spirit refuses them. Tego starts talking even when the blonde asks him to shut up, and he falls to his knees and with all his soul asks the spirit to help him. After a while the spirit replies, "Oh, will help them if they defeat the people who are causing her trouble in this area." Tevo immediately agrees, and the blonde says that she does not want to participate in the fight, but Chua blackmails her into agreeing. When night falls, they hide in the forest and wait until the attackers appear, and Louise continues to irritate Chua, hang on him. Suddenly, a notice to magicians in cloaks on the shore who seem to be casting spells, and Chua immediately rushes towards them. But before he can attack, Gutcha Otwa him, saying that they cannot attack them like this because the mages are very skilled and can easily kill. Shuaguchi proposes a plan he distracted will win. Su agrees with the plan, and Gutcha comes out of hiding to use his earth magic to create a lump of earth and throw it at his opponents, but the mages use their wind and fire magic to easily and effectively block attack. Stevo decides to attack, but the firebender throws a fireball at him, forcing him to retreat, but Stevo turns and knocks it off and then runs towards them, dodge the ice magic and cuts the fireball, but he is thrown back again by the magic and Icy falls to the ground and the enemies approach him to deal the final blow. But Louise intervenes and uses her magic to create an explosion that rips off their hoods, and the light shows that they were fighting with Tabitha and Jessica, who were also surprised to see them. The spirit and the others explain to them what is happening, and Jessica says that they were given the task of defeating the water spirit because it flooded the area and is causing damage. The spirit offers to summon the spirit and find out why she is doing this, and the blonde immediately begins to pose and the spirit appears. The spirit immediately asks why she flooded the area, and the spirit replies that it is a punishment because people stole her treasure and that is why she is angry with them. And if the treasure is not returned, she will flood the entire planet with water. Sue asks what kind of treasure it is, and the spirit answers that this is a magic ring that belonged to her and was stolen by a guy named Cramshow. Promises that he will find the ring and return it no matter what, and being an idiot, Louise agrees and throws him a special ingredient and also promises to return the water to normal. At the academy, Louise comes to her senses and cannot believe that she said such a thing to him and how she behaved. She is angry with him for allowing her to do this and tries to hit him, but then the window opens and the princess, who looks like a green one, flies in. Goblin Louise immediately approaches her and asks why she came to them at night alone. After all, it could be dangerous, but the princess replies that she has a very important matter and they need to keep it secret. She says that she will soon marry an ugly king from a neighboring kingdom in order to prevent a war between them. She does not like the king at all, but this must be done for the good of the country. The problem is that she exchanged hot messages with a prince from another kingdom, and if this comes out, their marriage can be dissolved, which will be very problematic. Louise kneels down and says that he will do everything possible to help her. But then Ed notices someone outside the door. He shouts to the stranger to show himself, and it turns out that it is Gooch, who comes inside and greets Princess and then says that he heard everything she said and will gladly help her. It seems that both Sada and Louise are angry at this bright guy, that the princess knows his father and allows him to help in the mission. Later that night, Sada goes to wash things and Siesta comes up to him apologizing for not believing in the story with the love potion. But Sada says that there is no need to worry about it and asks if there are scientists in the area. She takes him to an old scientist who has been studying dragons for a long time and is trying to find the remains of the last one dragon, and he says that a long time ago an acquaintance like Sada was summoned by the legend of Moms, and this acquaintance used void magic that no one else has seen. He also says that even Sada has the same mark on his hand, but they don't know anything else about it. Sada returns to the room and dresses Louise, who looks unsure because he thinks that she is not talented enough for such an important mission, but Sada says that she is strong enough to handle it, and Louise sadly lies down on the bed. The next morning they all gather on horseback on horses, and Louise looks at the ring that Henrietta gave her, saying that the bodyguard will go with them. They stand and wait for the bodyguard to come, but a mole crawls out of the ground, which turns out to be his familiars. The mole jumps on Louise and tries to take off the ring, and Gucci explains that he is a big fan of jewelry. A gray-haired tough guy named Worth is a famous knight. He comes straight to Louise and apologizes for being late, and Sada finds out that Louise is engaged to this man. Ward takes her bunk and says that they will now set off on their journey. They begin their journey, and Gutcha tells Jua what cool griffins or has and is angry that everyone is on their knees and blows the doom horde. After passing through a barren valley, they finally get to the city, and as soon as everyone enters it, Gutcha starts staring at them, explains that this city was built by a cool earthbender like him. Finally they get to the hotel and Ward says that they will spend the night here and tomorrow it will go on the road, but Jua doesn't answer. Louise tells Jua not to be so rude, and when Ward leaves, she tells him that her parents arranged this marriage, but Jua is still acting cold and jealous, so she tells him that Ward is a much better fighter and taller than Jua and leaves in the evening. In Peru, Ward praises Louis for summoning a familiar, which was unheard of before, and asks Gooch if he lost the duel with Jua why is he choking. Ward asks Jua if he has ever held a sword in his hands, and Jua replies that yes, without much interest, and Louise praises Ward for knowing so much. Ward looks at Jua and challenges him to a duel, which surprises them, but Jua is still angry and answers casually, while Louise asks him to apologize, but he doesn't want to or gets up and says that it's time for them to sleep, and the chat takes Louise to his room, while everyone is watching Zhuo leaves the Gichi, who is enjoying the night sky before heading to the club. Leaving Zhuo alone, he asks his sword if he knows anything about the previous person he knew, and the sword replies that he was the owner of the sword thousands of years ago and that it can only be used by a familiar person like him. Zhuo goes out sighing, and the sword says that Sada has the hidden ability to perfectly wield any weapon if he wants, and explains why the golden sword broke because it was a fake weapon. He asks if they can defeat Ward, but the sword replies that it only depends on Sada. Meanwhile, Ward has a drink with the underage Louise and tells how she cried in a boat in the middle of the lake, and then says that she has the power. Then he tells her that they should get married immediately after completing the mission because he can't wait for her to become an adult. He tries to kiss her, but she remembers Sada, and Ward stops and says that her heart is already taken, so it's no use. After that, he leaves the room and says that she will want to marry him by the end of the mission and leaves. The next day, Sada and Ward meet in an alley ready to duel, and although Louis asks them not to fight, neither of them is going to retreat. Sada takes out his training sword, Ward does the same and immediately starts attacking from all sides, and Ward simply dodges and blocks his blows by pushing him away with his sword. Ward praises him for his speed, but Sada is not in the mood for talking and gathers along the wall to attack, but Ward blocks his attack and attacks him again and again, and then uses a magic spell to throw him aside. While Louise runs up to him, Ward approaches Swan, says that he will never be able to defeat the magician and therefore will never be able to protect Louis, and leaves. In the evening, Swan looks from the balcony and on his cheeks tears flow when he remembers what Ward said. Louise comes up to him and asks why he is crying, but he replies that Alphas don't cry and these are just tears from stress. She tells him to stop because he lost to the best knight of the kingdom and he needs to come to terms with it, but Sada pushes her away and tells her to get out. Louise turns sadly and leaves, saying that after this mission she will marry War. After a while, a bunch of people come up to Swan and say that they need to leave, but suddenly the earth shakes and they turn around and see how a giant golem appears from underground. To their surprise, on top of the golem there is a thief who should be in prison. Meanwhile, Louise asks, where did those two guys go who, according to everyone, ran home scared? But before she has time to say anything, the Griffin descends the stairs and they see that the ship or tree or which they sailed is ready to sail. On the balcony, Yuchi is hiding behind the Sa, and FC uses his golem to attack, but Sa cuts off his hands and presses FC, but he simply uses magic to restore Gucci's hand. He immediately uses his earth magic to summon the fighting dolls that surround the golem, but Golem quickly deals with them and throws the last doll into Gucci, who falls in horror. The golem heads towards them, but suddenly he is blinded by a flash of light and he falls to his knees. They turn around and see the beaten Jessica, the dragon, who descends to the balcony. Having heard the noise, a crowd of local residents runs out onto the balcony and folk and friends run away hearing the loud whistle of the ship leaving. By the time the magician falls, Sada grabs the administrator, who tells him that Louise and War have long left for the ship, so he runs out and asks Gucci where the ship is moored, but Gucci says that it is too late and shows him the flying ship and the sight can only mean. While Louise looks at the ship with conflicting feelings, and Ward tells her that he will never leave her alone like Swat did, and she remembers how he pushed her and she becomes sad. Then she raises her eyes and tells Ward that she accepts his marriage proposal. She sits down on the ground and tells G that, in her opinion, Ward was working with Falcon and she just attacked them to distract them and prevent them from getting on the ship. Gucci is surprised by such a bold statement, and Jessica says that the next ship sails tomorrow morning and they have no choice but to wait. Suddenly the ground under Gucci's feet begins to tremble again. He falls, but it turns out to be his birthmark. Meanwhile, on the ship, War gives it to Louise a little more alcohol and promises to marry her as soon as they complete the task, and then asks for details, but Louise refuses to answer because the princess told her to remain silent. The next morning they finally arrive at their destination and enter the church, where they are immediately surrounded by guards hiding in the shadows. Louise hides behind the War and he says that they came to meet with the prince, but the commander of the guard replies that no one knows about this place. Louise says that Princess Henrietta told her about this place and shows the ring on his hand, and the commander immediately puts away the sword, takes off the glove and shows a similar ring on his hand. He asks her to give him a high-five, and as soon as they do this, rainbows appear from the rings, and the commander apologizes for the mistake and takes off his helmet to show that he himself is the prince of the kingdom of Tudor. Later that evening, Louise gives him a letter from Henrietta, and the prince, having read it, takes out the answer from the desk drawer and gives it to Louise. Louise looks up at him and asks, What was in the letter and whether there were others. There's some explicit messages, but the prince says that he cannot tell her about it and adds that in his country, there is a civil war between the royal family and the aristocrats who are being manipulated by a third party. He thanks her for giving him the letter and Louise asks him to be careful the next morning. She wakes up and sees that War is waiting for her outside. He says that the mission is accomplished and says that they will now get married right here and the prince will be a witness. Louise is nervous and breaks out of his arms, saying that now she cannot do this and that they need to return to their country. But Ward grabs her from behind and does not let go, saying that he is the very third party that is inciting a civil war in this country. Louise, in horror, breaks free and runs away, but crashes into another strange man who takes out the ring and with its help, subjugates Louise and she loses consciousness. That same evening all preparations are completed and Worth leads her to the altar where the prince reads their vows and Worth agrees while Louise tries to pull herself together and refuse, but the man is still controlling her. She almost agrees to the wedding but Sada interrupts the ceremony by shouting her name and everyone is surprised. This makes Louise lose her mind and she takes off dress while he tells her that the moth pursued her jewelry and brought them here. The prince, confused, orders the guards to arrest Sada, but Louise does not have time to tell him the truth as Worth pushes her away and stabs the prince in the chest before he falls to the floor. Louise rushes to the prince, but he simply takes the ring off his finger and gives it to her and then dies from loss of blood, while she screams Sato is preparing for battle. But Worth simply uses his magic to throw them all away, approaches Sato and puts a sword to his neck and she realizes that he is behind all this and Ward orders Louise to marry him so that they can rule the world together. But she refuses and she grabs the sword and its mark begins to glow brightly. He is angry at Ward for playing with Louise's heart and Ward leaves and gets up and his old rusty sword becomes shiny and new Ward uses his magic again. To his surprise the sword absorbs the magic and Sato jumps into the air to attack. And Ward uses his magic again but Sato cuts her and attacks him and then falls to the ground. And Ward falls. He gets up again and says that he has already killed the prince and now he has the letter that Louise had. Then he uses his magic to destroy the church. Everything around begins to burn and debris falls to the ground but Sato does not allow Louise to follow him and a burning stone falls on them. But Tabitha uses her magic to create a shield and transfer them in the safe place. By the time Mike falls, a fire has already gone out and Louise is still unconscious and sees herself in the boat, but this time instead of War, she sees Sada next to her. She finally wakes up when Sada took advantage of her condition, but decides not to attach importance to it, and they return home. The next morning Louise appears for the princess and hands her the ring, telling her that the prince was killed by War and the letter was also stolen. She takes responsibility for everything and begins to cry. But the princess stops her and hugs, also crying and thanks for everything she did. Later Louise comes to the director and the scientist Mac is also there asking for leave. When the scientist leaves, the director tells Louise that the scientist believes that he has found a place where the remains of the last dragon may be. The director doubts the existence of this place, but still lets him go. Then he asks Eliza about the report, and she tells him about everything what happened and he listens patiently and assures that she is not to blame for anything. Later she asks him why she called the human familiar and the director says that last time the strongest magician on Earth was summoned by a legendary human familiar and this upsets Louise because she can't even use elementary magic. After that she goes back to her room and gets dressed and Sada comes to the laundry but sees even more dirty clothes there and complains about it, as a result of which Louis turns into a dominant, beats him with a whip and then tells him to get out and throws a pillow at him. He falls and hits the pawn and Ronitsa and then sees that Siesta is walking past in different clothes. They sit down and she tells him that the holidays have begun and she is returning home. She says that her great-grandfather was always considered an alien from another world, like Shua, and that at that time there were 2 dragons. Sua was interested in this, and even Jessica overheard it when Siesta said that one of the dragons flew into the sun and died, and her great-grandfather flew on another dragon, but no one else has ever seen them. According to legend, the remains of the dragons are still somewhere in her village. This reminds Sada of a conversation with a scientist about dragons and he asks Siesta if she can take him to her village and she agrees. Meanwhile, Louise goes outside to find Sada because she is ashamed that she hit and kicked him out and trains to apologize, but she doesn't find him anywhere. Going out into the street, she sees how the self-propelled gun is leaving from school on horseback with Siesta and it shocks her, so she quickly goes to the cook and asks where Siesta went. The cook replies that she has returned to her village and Louise leaves too. romp through the jungle with Siesta on horseback while she asks if he can leave without informing Louise. Atsuyo, still angry with her, and says that everything is fine. Finally, they get to the village and Seo tells her to go ahead and tell him where to start investigating. Siesta thanks him for seeing her off and runs away to his home. And the scientist also enters the village to find the remains. After a while, Siesta returns with a map and they study from the site, trying to find the exact location, when suddenly the bushes rustled and a creature crawled out of them, which turned out to be a salamander, accompanied by Jessica. He raises his head and sees that a dragon is flying above them, together with a downed one. And a mole, in his bright clothes, crawls out from under the ground. He asks why they are here and Jessica answers that they are also here to find a treasure, which is known to be next to the dragon. A little later, they finally find the cave and joyfully go inside, and Salamander lights the way for them. They walk in single file, when suddenly Tabitha says that there is someone else in the cave and everyone freezes. Rarely Asada takes out a sword and Siesta hides behind him. Suddenly someone uses magic to break one of the ledges and warns that the next attack will be aimed at them. They are preparing for a fight and Jessica asks they stop because he recognizes the voice of the attacker. When the light falls on him, they see a scientist named Colbert who is surprised that they are here with Louise. Colbert immediately begins to study the map and Sada and Louise are still angry at each other. Louise says that she is only here as an assistant and they go forward again. Finally, they leave the cave into the dense forest and see an abandoned barn. Everyone begins to examine the barn and the castle on it, and Tabitha looks at something else nearby and approaches her and also looks, but is surprised to see the Japanese text. Louise and Tabitha cannot read it, but S.A. says that it is written in the language of his country. Meanwhile, the others manage to open the barn and they find something incomprehensible there. S.A. goes inside and is immediately surprised by what he sees. He runs his hand over the object and his mark begins to glow. He says that this is an airplane that people in this world mistook for a strange dragon. He tells Siesta that she looks different, and now he understands that her black hair and eyes are because of the Japanese blood that flows in her thanks to her grandfather. Suddenly Haver calls Sato and says that with the help of a plane he can return home, and this surprises Louise. He says that according to legend, two dragons flew in the sky and one of them flew into the eclipse and the other could not. Siesta adds that her great-grandfather circled in the air for some time before the earth, and Culver says that he must have calculated the time incorrectly. According to him, he can return to his world if he launches of this strange dragon in an eclipse, which is possibly some kind of portal. Later that day, they were able to return the plane to the academy, where everyone gathered to look at this previously unseen technology. Looking at him, Stada remembers that Colbert showed him a bottle with some kind of liquid that he mistook for dragon blood and goes to check. His suspicions were confirmed. The liquid turned out to be gasoline, and he tells Colbert that they cannot use it to refuel the plane, and Colbert promises to do a little more so that they can use the plane. In the meantime, he gets on the plane and begins to check all the instruments to make sure that everything is working fine, and to his surprise it works out easily. The sword tells him that this plane is designed for war and the sight can use any weapon, so he knows how to use it. He notices on the other side of the leaves, which looks at him and then leaves wondering if the sight will actually go. A frightened Gooch suddenly runs in on a horse and tells Louise that a big problem has happened. At first, Louise brushes him off, but he says that the Ward has captured the neighboring country of Albion and declared war on their kingdom. Meanwhile, the sight, which knows nothing about this, sits on the plane and thinks, when will the next eclipse be so that he can return home in Albion? A bald guy named Cromwell sits on the throne, and is glad that the plan goes like clockwork and thanks the people for stealing the ring of the water spirit for him. He looks at the map and plans to conquer the country of Triss, where Princess Henrietta rules. Ward tells him that everything is ready and that Triss will not be able to defend himself now because there are enough Dragon Knights of Albion to defeat them. Cromwell asks when they should attack, and Ward answers that they should attack on the day of the solar eclipse to take advantage of the darkness. The next morning, Saito approaches Louise and tries make peace with her. He says that he will leave in 3 days, but Louise asks Brady and says that she doesn't care and it hurts him. He leaves angrily and Louise suddenly looks after him. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, a military council is convened at which the commanders declare that the Albion army is too large and they don't think that the war with them can be won at any cost, so they offer to just surrender and save their lives. Henrietta becomes queen and says that they will never surrender because this is a question their honor and pride, so she herself will lead the troops, and her mother the queen simply agrees. Returning to the academy, Saito suddenly looks at the moon from the balcony. thinking that in 3 days he will leave and then return to his room and sit on a straw mattress. Meanwhile, all the magicians of the academy are called to the hall for a meeting where the director reports that in a couple of days the war will begin and that the princess herself will lead the army. So the academy will be closed until further notice. Scares the students who were planning to return home, and Gooch proudly declares that he will go to the army. But when Jessica points her finger at him, he admits that he is being forced to do this because his father, the commander. Having heard this, Louise returns to her room, turns on the light and, going up to the sleeping Sua, says goodbye to him because he is also going to fight on the front line. The next time, Ye finds a note by his bed and, having read it, finds out that Louise fired him and said that he can go wherever he wants. Soa finds it strange and shows it a note from Jessica and Tabidi, who look at her and Jessica tells him about the upcoming war about which he knew nothing and says that according to her, Louise went to Princess Henrietta to fight with her and it turns out because Louise joins Henrietta who takes her with her to the war. Meanwhile in the village of Siesta she works on the farm and remembers that in a couple of days she will leave the site. Suddenly she notices in the sky a ship full of warriors from Albion that she controls. Cromwell, with the help of his ring, tells them that Tristan refused to surrender and they go to war in the castle. The princess and the others are preparing for war, and they hear news that a warship has been spotted in a nearby village. The queen says goodbye to Henrietta, who goes to the battlefield. When morning comes, Shua checks the plane again and Jessica says that he needs to meet with Louis because he will no longer have this opportunity, but Shua refuses. At this time, Calvert arrives with barrels of gasoline that he was able to make during these days and tells Shua that he could have done more, but the war began and the village of Siesta became the first place where it began. Meanwhile, Henrietta and her troops go to the village. She thanks Louise again for accompanying her, but Louise's thoughts are busy with the Sa and the fact that he will leave soon. Suddenly, they stop when they see a warship in the sky and dragons are flying next to it. Returning to the academy, the garden tells everyone that they cannot allow Albion to destroy the village and is going to stop them with the help of this plane, and although Jessica tells him that the plane may be damaged and he will never be able to return home, Sada is ready to do anything to protect the village and orders Calbert to start the engine with the help of magic. Colbert starts the engine and Sada begins to accelerate the plane, but he understands that there is not enough space for takeoff and he will most likely crash into the wall. At the last moment Tabitha M.P. uses her wind magic to help him take off and Sada disappears in the sky after that. Tabitha calls her dragon and also prepares to take part in the war. And even Jessica agrees to go with her. Meanwhile Sada flies at full speed towards the village and realizes that there is still a lot of ammunition in the plane so he can contribute, and Tabitha and Jessica follow him on the ground. The princess finally develops battle plan and orders the Griffin to attack the Dragon Knights, and the rest of her troops will try to get to the battleship. A squad of Griffins flies forward and tries to use their wind magic against the Dragon Knights, but the dragons dodge much faster before releasing a powerful fire volley killing the Griffins. Meanwhile the cavalry is approaching the battleship and only the Geisha is smart enough to ask how it will even get to the ship that is in the air. But the commander continues to move forward. Alincourt shoots from guns again and again, pouring fire on the cavalrymen. Why does the Gitch go off course? But the Indian commander still goes forward, and Gucci tries to understand what is the meaning of this strategy. On the other hand, Siesta gathers the remaining villagers and tries to take them into the forest where they are all hiding, and Henrietta looks at the unfolding scene from the sky and notices that she is flying on her plane, which shocks everyone on the ground. After all, they thought that it was just a legend, but the Cool looks at the battlefield and decides not caring about his plans to return home, turns around and flies straight to the battlefield, demonstrating the true power of America. Shoots on his way, killing them one by one while the Dragon Knights are confused by the fact that they are being pursued and continues to kill, and this attracts the attention of the folk and the ward, who decide to join the battle themselves, while the site, meanwhile, deals with most of the Dragon Knights, while the army below watches with admiration. Finally, he kills the last dragon, but then another super-fast dragon dodges from his bullets and appears behind him holding a wart in his hands, who takes out his sword and directs wind magic at him. Sada immediately takes out the sword and absorbs the magic, unfolding and preparing to kick Horde's ass, but at the last moment he runs out of ammo. Meanwhile Fox renders the golem and attacks the army. And the ward again and again attacks the self-propelled gun, which absorbs the magic because Gooch can't do anything else. As a result, he stumbles upon the Tabatrian and decide to meet Falcon and his golem face to face. Gooch tries to run away, but Tabitha stops him, and Jessica provokes the folk taunted him. The folk is ready to attack, but Gooch uses magic to turn the golem into petals, and then with the help of alchemy turns it into oil, which Jessica sets on fire, creating a huge fire around the golem, which burns to ashes and falls apart, and the folk runs away pursued by the Gooch. Meanwhile, as at the cartridges run out and Ward begins to beat him, one of the wings catches fire, but before Worth can deliver a fatal blow, he is attacked by Tabitha and Jessica and he falls to the ground. Louise jumps from Tabitha's dragon to Sal, and Tabitha uses magic to help her land, and Sal grabs her by the hand and drags her into the cabin. He shouts at her for being so stupid, but Louise begins to cry and apologizes for her behavior. Meanwhile, Ward comes to his senses and again attacks Psyche, who takes out a sword ready to protect Louise at the cost of his life, and this awakens something in her, and suddenly his mark begins to glow brightly and Ward attacks the SPG and wounds him in the cheek. Suddenly Louise loses control of her body and points her wand at Ward. While the SPG tells her to get on the plane, the sword tells him that Louise's hidden abilities are manifesting and he must buy her time, but Ward continues to attack them and damages the engine even more, due to which the plane begins to fall, and the self-propelled gun pony realizes that the plane is to damage and he can't do anything while Ward is preparing to deliver the final blow. And Louise releases her magic and a huge white light appears that illuminates the entire sky, envelops Ward and burns the warship to the ground, and the audience looks at it from below. When the light goes out, Louise falls unconscious into Sada's embrace. He tries to fly the plane, but can't, so he tries to land the plane on the grass as safely as possible. Luckily, they land when the eclipse ends, and Tabitha and Jessica walk up to the burned ship in disbelief, not believing that Louis did such magic, when suddenly Cromwell appears and immediately uses his ring to force the girls to lie on the ground, and they can't do anything, and Gucci just beats this fool and knocks him out, saying that Fox escaped. Louise finally wakes up and scolds him for missing the eclipse and crashing his plane, but he tells her that he decided to stay here with her and she is happy, and they finally make peace with each other. The war is finally over and the heroes received medals. Louise was going to show Sada, but didn't find him and went in search. She walked through the lawns and gardens again until she saw Siesta talking to Sada. He noticed Louise was scared when she took out a whip ready to punish him again. Some time passed and the sight again found itself on a plane flying towards the eclipse, and the mark on his hand glowed brightly. He entered an eclipse similar to a black hole and, having passed through it, opened his eyes and saw many familiar buildings of people, and finally realized that he had returned to Japan. He joyfully flew through the streets looking around in search of Louise, but did not find anyone and began to look for her until he realized that he had returned here alone. Suddenly memories of how he was thrown into this magical world where Louise beat him, and where he even participated in a real war, and he cried, realizing that without Louise there was no point in living. He said her name and asked to return him to her, but the arm of the plane broke in half and he began to fall to the ground, and when he hit the ground, he woke up and realized that he had fallen out of bed. Louise wakes up and asks what happened to him, but Shua is so glad to see her that he just runs up and hugs her tightly, saying that he doesn't want to leave forever, and it makes her feel very good. But this woman is his greatest sadness, and she pushes him to the floor before telling him to go to bed again. Saiga silently gets up and lies down on the bed before falling asleep. The next day, a coronation ceremony is taking place in the castle, as Henrietta will become Queen of Triss for her services in the last war where she was able to save the country from complete destruction. It seems that the title does not really interest her, but the minister claims that the Trin son is still in danger and that now her leadership is needed more than ever. The whole city seems to be in a festive mood. Everyone is preparing for her coronation. Meanwhile, Cromwell is locked in a dungeon, but it is broken into by an unknown woman who approaches Cromwell's cell and says that she is disappointed in him. Cromwell begs to give him another chance and claims that suddenly an unknown magic has appeared that created a light that has destroyed all his armies, the street, and watch the parade. But before that, Louise gives him a pair of funny glasses, which, according to her, are a family heirloom. Man tells him to put them on because they suit him. Swa puts them on but can't take them off, and this seems to have been Louise's plan. They go outside, where he notices Siesta and immediately approaches her, inviting her to watch the parade with them. But she refuses, and suddenly Sada's glasses begin to glow. Louise comes out from around the corner and tells him that these are special glasses that glow when the owner looks at someone with bad intentions, and uses her magic to hit him. Then she drags him to the lawn, where they meet Duke and the blonde, who are also going to watch the parade. Sada looks at the blonde and his glasses are glowing again, and Louise hits him again, even scaring the principal, who is seriously thinking about kicking them out of school. she drags him again. And he notices Jessica and his glasses glow again, and he gets punished and then he is dragged again. And he sees Abida and again gets punished. His glasses continue to glow. When he habits looks at the girls and Luis makes sure that he is punished properly. Finally they go outside, and Sada decides to close his eyes so that he doesn't see anything, and Luis keeps a whip ready. Something happens suddenly. They hear some noise and go to see how the princess is driving down the street with her tiring, and Luis says Sada looks at the princess. He looks and she looks as beautiful as always, from which Sada's glasses begin to glow again, and this enrages Luis and she beats him until he loses consciousness, scaring everyone, and the guards come on alert and surround them, while the unconscious beauty is grabbed and brought to the palace, where Luis is not allowed to meet the princess. She angrily takes out a magic wand. One of the guards with a short haircut named Axe, who turned out to be an American, puts a gun to her face and demands that she put down her wand. Lucy says that it is necessary to free Sada. After all, it was she who caused the explosion and he did nothing, but Axe refuses. Meanwhile Sada is locked in a dungeon. He is furious and tries to throw away his glasses, but stops, thinking that if this continues, Luis will marry some rich aristocrat and he will just look at it from afar like a dog and support her, and then, when he dies, he will be considered a loser. He lies down on the floor and dreams of princess, but then he will be the princess herself who says that she came to him. He says that he never dreamed of her, and she takes him by the hands and says that she has a request. Sega again thinks about the princess and gets hit in the face by Nags, who knocks him down, and she snatches the gun from him and points it at him. The princess tells her to move away because she wants to talk to him alone. Siege teases her and she again hits him on the head before the princess stops her and she leaves. The princess says that she saw how she and Luis used magic that no one had seen before, and this put an end to the battle, and she again asks them for help. She explains that the ministers and generals advise her to immediately move against Albion to take advantage of their victory and end the war once and for all. But she does not want any more bloodshed and wants to end the conflict as quickly as possible. Why does she need their help? She tells him that they are one of the few allies of hers, and he agrees. She thanks him and asks him to stay for now at the academy with Luis. Be very careful because there are a lot of spies around. She says that someone entered the dungeon and killed Cromwell. She believes that it could not be one person because the locks on the door were multi-layer and only the one who was inside could open them. And then the killer entered and used a spell to completely suck the life out of Cromwell, leaving only his body outside. Henrietta looks at him and says that he can ask her for anything and she will give it to him for the help he provided, but before he can think of anything, the princess orders Agnes to let Luis in, and she enters with her head down, which scares Sada. He immediately retreats into the corner saying that he was not looking at the princess, but Luis begins to cry and rushes to him, apologizing for attacking him and saying that she was very worried about him. Stiga looks at her lovingly and reassures her, and by the time Ming falls asleep they are already in the carriage going back to the academy. Luis shows him the book that the princess gave her. There should be spells in it, but when she opens it there is nothing there. They think about it. Eeyore comes to the conclusion that the book is a work of modern art that says that one must always fight empty thoughts.